Good evening, everyone, and welcome back. It is your Tuesday night episode of Getting Defensive, brought to you by GridironRatings.com. I'm your host, Craig Reith. With me, as always, we have James, and back from special assignment, looking into all those rookies to give you the hottest takes. We have Gary back after he was out last week. But we have a special guest with us, of course. You can see back with us again is Justin Varnes. You can find with him at Down with IDP on Twitter. Justin, thanks for joining us, and how are you doing tonight?
Thanks for having me, guys. Doing well. Just trying to recover from all the post-draft madness, trying to figure out what rookies are going to do what this year. But yeah, all is good. Thanks for having me on.
And Gary, how are you after being out last week? I know you were sitting there watching us taking notes on the show last week.
Yeah, that special assignment didn't really, go too well. It just, I was really bored, but you guys pulled through for us. It was a good show. I, I couldn't wait and see how this ended on this draft, so I'm excited to kind of dive into this post draft, and glad to have Justin rejoining us back in the rotation again. It's always good to have Justin on.
And James, how did you enjoy the draft weekend there?
Not gonna lie, I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. I got kind of tired out by the end. Day three really hit me a lot harder than I was expecting in terms of just a lot of takes are out there on the Twitter sphere and on every other app that you can look at. And sometimes it's like, well, you want to be first, but you might not be the best. And I just needed to log off a little bit, but I'm back. I'm ready to go. Excited to really dive in and start doing some deep research now that we actually have landing spots and the information we always get that we just had to wait for.
Awesome. Well, we are going to be talking about the first round of the draft here tonight from an IDP perspective. We will not be going into the cornerbacks. They will have their own special show later on, given the nature of the cornerback position and how we've talked about it before. But I think there's a good 12 picks on the IDP side besides cornerbacks that we're going to be diving into tonight. But before we do that, we do have a little bit of news, some signings of free agents after the whole draft is over with. The first one, it felt like immediately after the draft, Devonte Quay signed a one-year deal with the Steelers, apparently to compete with Terrell Edmunds, who's also on a one-year deal. Gary, given that he's probably going to be competing with Edmunds, and we've kind of seen how both of those guys have gone throughout their careers, do either one of them really excite you?
No, not really. Probably just the same old coming out of that position. Really, I actually kind of throws a little cluster into the situation for me too. It's probably still Edmonds' job to lose. I don't see Kazee coming in and completely taking anything away from Edmonds. And we know he's not going to replace Fitzpatrick. I'm not real keen on Kazee joining there. Not at all. Not with the Steelers.
Any thoughts either way on that one, Justin?
I'm with Gary. I mean, that position for the Steelers hasn't been a fantasy boon for a while. I mean, Edmonds I think does a decent job. I see Kazee being there more as 3 safety sets, things like that, allowing Fitzpatrick to move around a little bit more. I think it gives the Steelers defense more versatility, but I don't think it necessarily helps either KZ or Edmonds for fantasy. Makes me however high I was on Edmonds, which wasn't crazy high, it just knocks him back a couple of ticks for me.
And James, I know we had talked about Terrell Edmunds last week, and you weren't too high on the situation at that time. I'm guessing that really hasn't helped anything at this point with the new signing.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't helped anything, but it's also like if you're going to lose out to Devonte Quay at this point in his career, you were losing out to begin with. I fully expect Edmonds to totally not be fazed by KZ. And if he is, well, he's the guy that we all thought was pessimistically a very, very bad option. And realistically, he doesn't have much of a ceiling. So, as we discussed last week, it's very much the same old in Pittsburgh. This signing shouldn't really do anything. We're multiple weeks into free agency, and at this point, there's very few signings that are going to, light up anyone's radar, and this one certainly is not one.
KZ is KZ. He's not better than Edmonds on paper. So it wouldn't make much sense.
This next signing is a little bit more interesting. Justin, I'm going to go to you for your take on this one. Tyrann Mathieu signed a 3-year, believed to be $33 million deal with $18 million guaranteed with the New Orleans Saints to be their second safety along with Marcus May. How are you feeling about his fit with that secondary in New Orleans?
I like it. I mean, I think there are a lot of places he could have gone I would have been upset about. Matthew's still a versatile player, and we saw what happened in Kansas City. They needed so much help with their linebacking situation and in their safety situation. Daniel Sorensen, we don't have to get into that mess again. Tyrann Mathieu, I don't think spent enough time being in a position to attack the football from the defensive side of the ball when he was with Kansas City the last couple of years. I think this puts him in a good position. He should kind of maintain that Malcolm Jenkins role from last year in this Dennis Allen defense. I think it's a good fit for him. I think we'll get more production out of him than we've gotten lately. I like Marcus May a lot. I continue to like him, but he's a very versatile player. I think they're going to use him to basically take over that Marcus Williams role, and I see Mathieu being more of the Malcolm Jenkins in this role, and of course the Swiss Army knife being C.J. Gardner Johnson, excuse me. So I think this helps his fantasy prospects. Most people overvalued Mathieu over the last couple of years in Kansas City. I think we might actually see this flip around. He might get undervalued from his poor seasons. It's just a matter of a scheme shift that should help him.
James, do you like his situation better than Kansas City?
I guess I do. He kind of came as a package deal with Daniel Sorensen, who's also over in New Orleans. So I find that just mildly funny in a weird, morbid kind of sense. But at the same time, I don't know. Those New Orleans safeties never really produce high volume. Matthew's 30. When you look at it from a dynasty perspective, he's been overrated the past few years. So like Justin said, maybe he's going to come down a little bit. But generally, a new face in a new place with a little bit of optimism, and it's a name brand, that price doesn't come down. So he's someone I'm probably going to just not have a lot of investment in when it's all said and done. Do I see a little bit of reason to go, hey, maybe things could, turn out excellent? Yeah, but I can say that with pretty much everyone in the offseason. When the actual season rolls around, I'm expecting Honey Badger to be, solid, nice, good, quality, but nothing that gets me excited to want to go and reach for him somewhere. He's very much I'll take it if it falls to me kind of guy.
Gary, any final thoughts on Tyrann?
In short, hopefully not really depending on him as a starter in most formats, maybe in a deeper format. Other than that, not off the top, no. Really avoiding who ends up deep in that scheme, just the whole Marcus Williams. Marcus Williams just came from there, and he's an excellent player. He's just so highly graded, but he produced like nothing for IDP purposes because he plays that deep free safety. So I have to agree with both of them.
All right. Well, before we dive into our rookie talk here for tonight, I want to make sure you all are over on gridironratings.com, subscribed, go over and get all that great content in their new rookie draft guide. We gave you a little bit of a preview last week on the offense and defense, but Gary, I know you had a few thoughts to share on that.
Yeah, you guys make sure you go over, check out all of our new stuff on our YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, please comment on these things. Check out the fantasy football review that Ronnie Evans and our founder Jeff. I'm gonna butcher it. Demito. He's probably watching. Demito. No, I'm gonna mess it up. Jeff, our founder. They got some really good stuff going on. They're gonna give you sneak peeks of the draft guide. It's really cool. It's in depth. It's online. It's always up to date. So check all that out and help support the channel by leaving us a few comments, even if you're just saying hi. We'd love to get back to you.
All right. And with that, on YouTube, like Gary said, make sure you're on there, which I'm sure you are because you're watching us on YouTube, and thank you for that. But make sure you hit the like button, you're subscribed, and you have the notifications on. That way anytime any one of these shows goes live, that you get that nice little pop-up window and ding or whatever you have set for your phone for notifications. But rookies, it's the talk of the town, what everyone wants to be hearing about right now. So we're going to give you some IDP talk here. We're going to go in order of the first round as far as the relevant IDPs. First one was Travon Walker. I have him as a defensive lineman for the Georgia going to the Jets. He does have some little bit of positional flexibility. And Justin, with that, I wanted to get your thoughts not only on just him going there in general, but where you think he fits along that defensive line.
Well, it was a high risk pick. I think high risk might be stretching it, but I think Aidan Hutchinson is the more polished player. He's the higher floor player. Got a lot of great stuff going on, but physically, in terms of physical gifts, Walker has him. A bigger wingspan. He's faster. He's stronger. And these things, long term for Jacksonville, I think, they're obviously building toward the future. So I think they took the gamble to go with less of a sure thing, but certainly somebody with more of a high ceiling. And I like that move. He doesn't have a lot of competition. First of all, we got to see Josh Allen finally blossom. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Playing across from Josh Allen when he can get those snaps is going to help him a lot. Teams are now having to account for Josh Allen this year. His main competition is going to be Kayvon Chason, who has yet to fully blossom as a 3-down player. I'm not sure that he will. My guess is if you're taking somebody like Travon Walker, that's bad news for Chason. Arden Key is another one, somebody they can use on the outside as well as kick in on the inside. I see a lot of snaps with Allen, Key, and Travon Walker on the field, and Chason being maybe the odd man out there. He's got potential to get up into the maybe 800 or 900 snaps. He's probably going to end up closer to 700. So what I mentioned about Josh Allen, I want to mention about Travon Walker. I thought the world of Josh Allen coming out of the draft. One of the biggest mistakes that happened in the IDP world is we have all of these rookies and we get very excited about them, but very few of them, even the first rounders, are high impact players their rookie season. And Josh Allen is a perfect example of that. He tore it up that halfway through, midway through last year. He was a baller, but his rookie year, he wasn't at all. I'm just going to throw a couple of numbers at you here. So, this draft that we just had, we had 13 defensive linemen and edge. Last year, the draft from 2021. Excuse me. We had 13 edge rushers or defensive linemen. Of those 13, none of them finished in the top 20. We had Greg Russo and Jalen Phillips both finished in the top, I think, 35, something like that. Russo and Phillips were certainly usable for fantasy, but for all those great edge rushers, their rookie year, it really is difficult to come out and just immediately kill it. Walker has some developing to do. As far as dynasty, if I'm in a dynasty pick, I'm probably going to go Walker over Hutchinson just for the long term. But to me, he has fewer hurdles than a lot of these other edge rushers and defensive linemen have in terms of play time. I think he's going to get out there early and often. I think he will make a splash and he'll show us what he's made of. But I wouldn't take him in redraft this year. I definitely would invest a high pick in dynasty, though.
Gary, did the pick of Walker going 1 surprise you at all?
Yeah, I was really confused what it was. Why didn't they go Hutchinson? The completely safer, in my eyes, safer pick. Why didn't they just do it? Did they have something going on because, he's a Michigan guy? Is it, what really is it? I don't think the Jaguars, it's not that I hate the pick, but I don't think the Jaguars really have that kind of setup right now where they can wait on a player right now that they're spending this kind of draft capital on. And I have to agree with Justin. I mean, he's not going to be real impactful his first season to the point that you're going to want him for a redraft and a startup. If we're lucky, he might be a serviceable buy guy, something like that, matchup dependent type play. I think Justin might be a little bit more enthusiastic about his production than I am, but if there's anybody that's a little bit low on these guys when it comes to their rookie season. It's tough. Like Justin said, there's a learning curve coming into the NFL. And it doesn't matter how good you are, how talented you are, you will be tested. And I don't know exactly how to look at this whole entire IDP class right now, but I'm not overly impressed so far with how everybody's landed and how many we're going to get out of this class. It's tough.
Any final thoughts on Walker, James?
Well, ditto what both Justin and Gary said. He's, he's the first overall pick. Things are nice when you're the first overall pick. You can't really trash that too much. But at the same time, he's not Chase Young. He's not Myles Garrett. He's not at that level where you're coming and looking for instant production. And if you look historically over the past decade or so, if you don't have that guy, the guy who's the consensus number one edge guy, you're really not getting any fantasy production. So, could he be a bye week play here and there? Sure, I think that's possible. But do I want to draft him in a redraft and sit on him and wait for him to mature into being an actual viable bye week player? No, I want to use that roster spot and turn over much better, higher reward players in a redraft. In a dynasty, yeah, I'm interested because he's the number one overall pick. Of course, there's some upside there. It's not hard to find that, but relative to your average number one overall pick, yeah, things aren't that great here. He's going to Jacksonville. They had 32 sacks as a team last year. Should they improve? Yeah, they should improve, but seeing immediate massive production, I don't buy it. I'm not really interested here. Maybe I'll just throw a dart at him if he slips in a draft, but that's a weird thing to say about the number one guy, but that's where I'm at.
You mentioned Chase Young. One of the people I see when I see Travon Walker is Chase Young's bookend, and that's Montez Sweat. I think that's what he could be. He's a freak of nature physically. I think he's going to make splash plays. Could he? He's not developed enough to be a 3-down player, not remotely right now. Could he develop into that kind of player 2-3 years now and become possibly a Danielle Hunter 3 or 4 years from now? Yes. I mean, the tools are there. It's not likely. That's a hard thing to do. But you see somebody like Aidan Hutchinson, that might be more like a Chase Young, somebody who's more gifted, who has more together, can set an edge and be physical, has a larger array of pass rush moves. Montez Sweat is the physical presence, the when he happens to get a lane, he's going to tear it up and he'll throw some highlight plays, but snap in, snap out, 50, 60 snaps a game. I just don't think Walker's there yet.
Let's not forget Chase On was a former first-round draft pick himself. He's only heading into his second or third year?
Second, I think.
Third.
Right.
Third.
So, look, there's another guy. There's first-round stock there. Well, it'll be interesting how they'll deploy these guys. They've got multiple guys. They've got investment. It's going to be interesting.
Speaking of Hutchinson, who had been brought up, Gary, I want to get your thoughts on him. And you kind of mentioned something I had talked about on a different show, but do you think, and you can lead this into your overall discussion about Hutchinson, but do you think Trent Baalke's hate-hate relationship with Jim Harbaugh potentially played into the not wanting to take him?
It sure seems. It's a good speculation. I believe it's possible. I think it's nuts. I think that Hutchinson was clearly the number one overall selection here. If you're looking for an edge rusher off the top in the draft, I don't get it. He's got a little bit more on tape. He's a little bit. I don't want to do what everybody's saying it looks like Nick and Joey Bosa or anything like that. I don't want to do any comparing it at all. The guy's got the same tangibles when you watch him. A lot of people can just imagine him in Ohio State outfits. Anyways, for a Michigan guy, I'm probably going to get a lot of hate mail for that, right? Probably. Anyways, but I'm glad to see him land with the Lions. They need something like this in Detroit. This should work out well for them. I think if there's anybody in this class that can step right in and has the opportunity, his first year to be of some value in redrafts, will probably be Aidan Hutchinson. If he's a edge rusher, play DL play, possible defensive end, who knows? But I mean, and depending on your scoring format, but he definitely has the upside if he's his kind of a player is valuable in your league. Trey Flowers has vacated some snaps. Okawara, he's coming off an Achilles, I believe or something. So. All right. So then Charles Harris, Charles Harris revived his career last year, right?
Yes,
right.
The breakout or
something.
something.
Former number ones.
Yeah. Former number one. Here we're talking about
rounders.
Here we're talking about former number ones. That was years ago, right, Justin? And like you was talking about, Pitt takes guys a long time to develop. But in my eyes, if anybody's going to have the chance to lead the edge rushers, the outside linebacker type, defensive end type dudes this coming year, it's probably going to be Hutchinson. You guys are going to have to check back with us later on next week. We're going to follow up the second round on Thursday. And then next week, we're going to get into some more hardcore ranking, some overall IDP and such and positional. So make sure you tune in for that. But I'll quit rattling.
James, how do you feel about his fit there? Do you think he just steps in right away and is a starter from day one for the Lions?
Day one, that's tough to say. It's really hard for any rookie to just walk in and day one be the guy. There's enough veteran depth in Detroit that I don't see him just taking the snap lead from the beginning. But at the same time, I expect him to get that snap lead soon enough. We're talking about former first rounders who bloomed a little bit late. They also got Michael Brockers over there, who I know he's a little more on the inside, but there's plenty of talent on that defensive line in Detroit. It's kind of quietly there because I think all of us think of Detroit and we think of bad football because that's what's been going on our entire lifetime. But that defensive front's not too bad. I think Hutchinson could look totally fine there. And like Gary said, he might be the leader in being able to actually have some redraft value out of this draft class. But, we're 22 minutes into this episode, and I'll finally say it. There's no reason to really invest in any of these rookies in a redraft league. You can throw a dart at them in the last round, maybe hope to hit something. If you're in a super deep league, obviously that's different. But in a standard size league, this episode's not for you. You should be thinking dynasty here. You can think long-term, but short-term, if Hutchinson's the best guy and we're going, hey, he might beat out Michael Brockers, that's not exactly what you're looking for. And, to Justin's main overall point, it takes a while for defensive linemen to mature. It takes a while for edge rushers to figure out how to edge rush. It's just a waiting game. And in fantasy football, you can't wait on guys and spend a roster spot in your standard league. So while I like him and I think he's totally fine and things could get better and, that's nice, it's also just too far away. I don't really care right now. I'll just sit and wait and go and grab someone who's going to bust faster or succeed faster, and then go and grab one of these rookies when they start maturing after someone else dropped them in week 9.
And Justin, I wanted to get your thoughts. He really feels that Hutchinson like a Dan Campbell kind of player, and we kind of saw that in the reactions from Dan Campbell when they took him. Do you think that he really fits that sort of atmosphere that Dan Campbell and the culture that he's trying to create there in Detroit?
I do. Some of the stuff that I read about Hutchinson, a lot of stuff I read about Walker, from coaches and whatnot, had a lot to do with his physical presence, his physical traits that he's going to show up to the NFL. He has an NFL body, an NFL edge rushing body. What I heard about Hutchinson is, he obviously also is physically gifted. What I heard a lot about Hutchinson was his preparation is off the charts. Greg Cosell, one of the guys who studies film like crazy, said it was clear when you watch Hutchinson that he has a game plan against each offensive lineman, and he is trying to execute that for 4 quarters straight. Like, he's methodical in his approach to attacking. And that sort of mental toughness, that sort of preparation, I think is what makes Dan Campbell giddy. I think he knows that to be a true NFL player, to be a 3-down player, to play every single snap, particularly on the line, right? That is, that is trench warfare. You have to go at it snap after snap after snap. And most rookies mentally, forget physically, which is also an issue. Most rookies mentally can't process that much, can't stay that focused for that long. And I think it's those traits that really help elevate Hutchinson's ability to get to 3 downs, maybe sooner than some of the others. I totally agree with James. I know James and I both basically said the same thing about redraft is almost possible. If you were going to take an edge rusher in your redraft at the very end, to me, Hutchinson is the guy. And that's just because he has such a high floor. I don't see him having too much competition. Obviously, Charles Harris will be some competition there. I could see plenty of NASCAR packages that puts Harris, Brockers, and why am I blanking on the main guy there? Who's their main edge rusher? Or am I blanking on him?
Okoro.
Oh no, yeah. So yeah. To me, I could easily see those guys all being on the field in multiple snap situations. I think that Okoro is not going to be as good against the run, so I could see Hutchinson getting more snaps. I think his snap floor is higher than almost every other edge rusher in this class, but we might be looking at, like I was saying, like Rousseau finished as like a low DL2, high DL3. Right. I think that's a pretty optimistic forecast for 2022 for a player like Hutchinson, which, by the way, is very good. I mean, that's really good. That's a great dynasty profile. But for redraft, there's just so many other proven veterans out there. It's hard.
Right. I want to be clear about that. In a redraft, I'm saying that he might have some production. It's not going to be like, well, I'm going to go get him as my starter. Yep. I'm going to avoid him as a starter until that's all that's left in the draft. If that makes any sense, because then your depth chart or your selections or whatever, your roster setup will decide whether or not that you need to reach that far in a redraft. Now if you got taxi squad, well, that's a no-brainer, right? Whatever. Yeah, I guess. So, all right.
Next guy up here, James Kayvon Thibodeaux. He went number 5 overall to the New York Giants. He's going to play opposite Azeez Ojulari, who's their second-round pick, and had a nice couple games there. How do you feel about his fit with this rebuilding Giants defense?
I mean, he's a nice fit for a rebuilding Giants defense insofar as he's young, he's a top 5 pick, and he's got plenty of upside. When you're looking at it from a fantasy perspective, there's a lot of youth on this Giants defense. Someone's likely to kind of step up and look great. Someone's likely to look kind of mediocre, and then someone should probably crash and burn, as just the law of averages. Well, do I really want to invest here? I guess I can, but I just find a hard time finding real thoughtful, concise, deep words to say about players when I'm speculating about long-term future value when it's obvious. He has high draft capital. He's going to a defense that's looking to rebuild, so he should get opportunity as a young player. And you just got to kind of wait and see things playing out. There's not really much to say other than that. And in theory, he should succeed. Why? He's a top 5 pick. Top 5 picks should succeed. But, we often see is the case with, many edge rushers. They don't succeed. Their Cleveland Farrell comes to mind. He had the exact same type of situation when the Raiders drafted him in terms of a rebuilding defense that was coming through. He's going to have Max Crosby over there. Things are looking great. And, things crash and burned. Why? I don't really know exactly why, but it's probably due to the fact that Cleveland Farrell's just not that good despite being a physical freak. Could that be the same situation here? Yeah. Or, we could have the next great edge rusher. It's just kind of a wait and see approach. I know that's a very boring and not a very many quick answer, but it's just I don't really have a truthful find or a sneak preview that I can go and grab and tell you. It's, yeah, things could work out here. You can go invest in the obvious draft capital and wait and see, or you can try and find something that might bust or succeed a little bit faster, and then readdress this when the prices all come down and the rookie shine has worn off a bit.
Justin, Thibodeaux, if you go back a year, was projected by a lot of people to be the number 1 pick or, a top 2 pick going into this draft. And, a lot changes over the course of a year. But where does he fit into sort of these top 3 edge players that were taken for you in terms of ranking them?
For me, he's a distant third to the first 2. And some of that has to do with his landing spot. In traditional leagues, I would not be surprised if Thibodeaux doesn't get labeled an OLB on this defense. They could certainly use him in the Sam spot at times. The other thing that concerns me about Thibodeaux at this point is his array of pass rush moves isn't that deep. He's got two that are great, and then after that, he just like Walker, he needs development, and he'll get development. I mean, but as of right now, veteran O linemen are not going to be impressed if they have to play this guy 40 snaps in a row. They're going to see his couple of moves, and they might get beat a few times, but then that'll be about it, and word will spread. I always think about if you have like one or two pass rush moves. I always think about that from a baseball player's perspective. It's like, okay, yeah, that guy can hit the fastball. He's hit a couple of home runs. Now we're just going to throw him off-speed junk, and he's going to be out of the league in 3 years. So I'm not saying that's what's going to happen to Thibodeaux, but he definitely has developing. Can he finish developing and create a wide array of pass rush moves? Possibly, but Hutchinson already is more developed than Thibodeaux in that fashion. So my biggest concern right now is his landing spot. In a traditional league, he's probably going to be an OLB, and I don't see a ton of production coming from Thibodeaux yet. To me, he projects having value 3, 4, 5 years down the road, whereas somebody like Hutchinson could have real value next year. To me, I'd rather take Hutchinson than Thibodeaux. And to me, there's a pretty big gap between those first two and Thibodeaux.
And Gary, I'll give this to you to finish him off. I know you weren't a big fan of Aziz and what he did last year. Are you feeling better about Thibodeaux and that same team?
Well, I got a little bit interested in this somewhat. I mean, dynasty-wise, I actually kind of like his opportunity a little bit to make a little bit of an impression this year. Is he up here with Hutchins? Probably not. But I think it's very well possible that if Hutchins kind of stammered a little bit or some possible injury, knock on wood that doesn't happen, that Thibodeaux could probably have a decent season. I think there's some playing time here. The Lorenzo Carter moving on. I think they're not going to have a choice but to throw this kid into the fire a little bit. And I believe it too, that he's not going to be able to, get into the backfield. He's limited on his moves because he's got that rookie learning curve. He's going to have to develop a little bit. But I actually like this opportunity to where I actually have him around my second guy. I think we're going to do some ranking next week, but I like him a little bit better than Walker and for this year for a shot. See, I have this theory. Are you drafting rookies for the potential first year production and dynasty value, or are you looking completely at the dynasty value? And unfortunately, you can't know most of this until you get them drafted, get them on rosters. We see what they're looking at. You look at the players that are around and whose contract's going to be up when and all of that other crazy stuff to make a call on this. So either way, I'm going to swing a little bit. If I was looking had a deep bench, I'd probably make him my second edge rusher off the board at this point.
All right. Well, we're going to try to get through these guys a little bit quicker here to make sure we get through all of them for you.
Oh, wow.
Justin, the next one up, we got Jordan Davis here, and I just want to get your perspective on him from a pure defensive tackle or interior defensive lineman league, because I don't think he's probably going to have a whole lot of value early on in terms of just straight defensive lineman leagues, because he doesn't project as a 3-down tackle right now. But if you're looking at a defensive tackle interior lineman league, how are you feeling about that landing spot in Philadelphia?
I'm not feeling great about it. He could be the heir to Fletcher Cox. Cox is getting long in the tooth, and they're going to need to spell him. What Davis is going to need to become fantasy relevant and DT required leagues, to me, is going to be a scheme change. Right now, what they're and obviously, things are changing there in Philly. But what they've been running over the last couple of years is essentially they call themselves alpha and beta. Basically, they have two complete defensive offensive lines, and they just constantly rotate to keep everybody fresh. And that's obviously a common thing nowadays, where Buffalo might be the greatest example of that. It's just like rows of shark's teeth. These linemen, always staying fresh, which is great for the actual defense and bad for fantasy, because nobody, plays more than 50% of the snaps. And Davis is built to play maybe 50% of the snaps. He's a 2-down player. And as a 2-down player, he doesn't even really have much value as a pass rusher. If he happens to get through, he can wreak havoc. But in terms of pass rush moves, he doesn't really have many. And he has limited mobility. He's more of a contain the run kind of guy, which is incredibly valuable in real football. For fantasy, I don't see Jordan Davis being much, unless somehow they change things up in Philly and Fletcher Cox retires, which is going to be probably next year or the year before. So he's a couple years down the road, and even that, I don't see much fantasy value here unless something changes in Philly.
I haven't really seen any differing opinions of that. So, Gary or James, any other thoughts on Davis?
I'll say I feel like Justin's comments, which sound very pessimistic, are like the most optimistic scenario for me. I feel like you can entirely write him off from a fantasy perspective.
Right.
He is absolute dust in every way, shape, and form. It's hard to say that about a guy who gets drafted top 15 overall, but I can say that with about as much confidence as you can about someone who just got drafted top 15 overall. Hard pass, even in interior defensive lineman leagues. No interest. It's not going to be there early. Maybe it'll be there in 3 years, but I'll go find my investment somewhere else in 2.5 years.
Hell of an hell of an NFL talent. Nothing for IDP. You can get him off the waiver wire. Most leagues probably don't put a lot of capital into him.
What you want to do is have your league mates draft him.
Oh yeah,
right.
You want to leave him out there.
That's
say,
a
"Oh,
solid
yes, take all the
DL
Davis you
play,
want,
buddy." Yeah, stick him in there with all those DLs. He looked nice in there.
Exactly.
Matched up versus Boza. All right.
Yeah.
Well, Gary, I know you.
Hey, tell you the truth, real quick too. Don't forget about Milton Williams. He's their third rounder from last year. Either Cox and Hargrave. They're not going to give up their snaps this year. It's not going to happen. So it's going to be some deep rotation. I'll leave it alone now. We're done.
Gary, I know you've been doing some of your dime drops about rookies here lately, and one of the guys that you had one a number of years ago that worked out really well, it looks like he may be being replaced. There's even been talks of him being on the trade block. That'd be Chuck Clark with the drafting of Kyle Hamilton. If he doesn't get traded, that certainly could end up being a mess, but it certainly looks like a long-term really great position for him for NFL. But how do you feel about Kyle Hamilton going there from an IDP perspective?
I mean, just based on the Baltimore's defense alone, and what it could offer, I like it a lot. It'll be tough his first year. I think that he kind of fits in like a nickelbacker in this whole situation, and when it's all said and done, it really depends, I suppose, on really what they do with Clark. You're going to see a lot of defensive backs on this field anyways. Towards the end of last season, he was using Tony Jefferson, of all people. Towards the end, they had him in there playing some nickelbacker and some in the box play. It might surprise us what they pull this year. Do I see him making a huge impact? I think right now, as long as Chuck Clark is there, I don't think there's no clear cut to DB1 coming out of him. I do that thing where I track all the rookies each year and see what their percentage of the top 64 and standard size leagues, top 64 IDP are about the only ones that really matter on this overall starting basis each week. And, that mark's not even at 4% right now working out. So we only had 2 of them last year. I like Hamilton as it sits right now. He's the number 1 DB off the board so far for me. I mean, he will but I don't know. I think there might be a few other positions considering what I can do at DB with some lesser names and probably get the same production out of the first year. I don't think Kyle Hamilton's going to come out here and have a chin year. He's not going to explode off the map. So he might be my first top DB, but he's going to be down the board a little bit, I think, on who I might prefer for first year production. Dynasty, you can't beat it. Chuck Clark gone. Then you got to talk about some contention for DB1. I'd have to say.
Justin, is he your first rookie defensive back off the board as it stands right now?
He actually is not. I hate this. I love Kyle Hamilton. He is, to me, he's one of the best athletes in the draft. I was so excited about seeing where Kyle Hamilton landed. And when he landed at the Ravens, I threw a milkshake at my television. And that's only because, maybe they moved Chuck Clark. That might happen. His contract expires next year. And he's not a crazy big cap hit. They could cut him before June 1st or trade him, but they have a ton of DBs there. Obviously, Marcus Williams, which we talked about. However much you believe in PFF's grading system, both Marcus Williams, I think, was a top 10 safety for them, and Chuck Clark was, I think, top 25 or top 30. Both of these guys are stellar players. Tony Jefferson has been around forever and has been a movable piece. They always put a bunch of DBs on the field. I think they need more coverage help because even though Patrick Queen got better and got more productive and started making more snaps toward the end of the year, he still was bad in coverage. So I think they're going to continue to roll a ton of DBs out there, which just for this year, I think makes it tough because they'll still use Jefferson. They also, don't forget, they've used Geno Stone and Brandon Stevens. They'll get them on the field a good amount of time. That's a lot of safeties.
Well, they had a lot of
different packages.
They had a lot of injuries last year. I mean, they did have to roll out these guys, and some of these guys kind of stepped up. Yeah. But I have to agree, there's going to be a lot of Queen's not getting it done.
No. So is there a scenario that basically Queen goes back to being a 40 to 60% player and they find a way to get Hamilton and Clark and Williams on the field a ton? Remember, it was only a couple of years ago, and Tony Jefferson was one of those guys where the Arizona Cardinals had 3 top 15 safeties every week. You could, all 3 of them, they stayed on the field 100% of the time, and they all produced for fantasy. So that's certainly on the table. I just hate seeing all of these safeties, and particularly with Wink Martindale's use of disguising these guys, moving these guys around. It just creates more chances for chaos, and chaos is great if you're the defense. It's terrible if you're looking for consistent production, and that's what I'm worried about for Hamilton. Not long term. I do love him long term. I just hate that I'm afraid he won't be as valuable this year.
And not to drag it out much more, but I mean, I find this kind of funny about these rumors about him getting ready to be traded, because Chuck Clark was actually a Harbaugh favorite just a couple of years ago. So what happened? All right.
Well, talking about what I thought was an odd situation, I know you don't dig too much into this, James, but Quay Walker going to the Packers was a bit of a head scratcher for me. I know he had rumors of him moving up people's draft boards, and the real NFL came about, but they didn't use a whole lot of 2 linebackers, sort of true inside linebackers. They had the 2 edge guys, and then pretty much Devonte Campbell only last year. I'm a little bit skeptical that they're going to completely change their philosophy and have more linebackers on the field, but how are you feeling about this, James?
I think your skepticism is well placed. I'm as skeptical as well. The Green Bay hype machine is putting out, he's a near clone of Devonte Campbell, which, is very nice, but also not very nice for short-term fantasy production, at the very least, because Devonte Campbell's currently there, and his contract has no real outs for at least 3 years. So, yeah, he might line up next to him, but what is he going to do? Put up Chris Barnes numbers? That's fine. That's acceptable. I think that'd be a very optimistic outcome for his rookie season. And that's also very forgettable from a fantasy perspective and not at all worth investing in. So when that's the peak of what I think he can do this coming season, I don't really have any interest here in a redraft. Obviously in Dynasty, like we've said for pretty much all these people, they've got a lot of long-term outlook, but their short-term outlook, not so hot. And with Walker, it's really down to not really having that clear playing time, that clear path, that clear and obvious, oh, here's the old veteran who he's about to displace. Because that old veteran's Devonte Campbell, and he shouldn't get displaced because if they wanted to displace him, he'd be gone. So I'm not really liking this. This feels very much a Packers draft where you already have a strength so that if that strength falters, you can have another guy, which is interesting when they have some weaknesses. But that's kind of how they do things up there in Wisconsin. So I guess it's wow, Devonte Campbell got hurt. Great draft pick, got a draft pick, but not betting on that. So I'll just let somebody else take him. Kind of like how I feel with most of these guys.
Gary, do you feel like getting defensive about that?
Yeah, not at all. I mean, they'd have to change the whole culture of what they've done with the linebackers other than Blake Martinez. They got one full-time guy, and Campbell's that this year. So, I mean, long dynasty-wise, yeah, Walker might be all right. I don't know. How long's Campbell's contract? A couple of years, right? A few years, whatever.
It's at least 3 years, I think. Yeah.
Right. Do you want that production now, or you want to stash a guy for later? I'd rather take my chances and get him off the waiver wire if all of a sudden he breaks out.
All right. Well, this next one is for JJ on the Thursday show if you're listening live or later on. But Justin, the Jets traded back up into the first to get Jermaine Johnson, edge player, who a lot of people thought would be going a lot earlier in the draft. Karlaftis was going to be a big name there and got hurt. If Jonathan Franklin-Myers, how do you feel about him fitting in there on a hopefully improved defense this year?
I like him for the Jets in particular long term. If I were them, I would have traded up for him. There's a little group of edge rushers here at the top, and it was starting to run very thin by the time pick 26 rolled around. So I think they realized that this was their chance to get kind of the last of this like little elite crew of pass rushers, or the best available pass rushers of this draft. I like Johnson. I think that he'll get used in passing down situations kind of earlier on. One thing I read from Robert Saleh was they like John Franklin-Myers on the outside for edge setting and run stopping. What they really like about John Franklin-Myers is kicking him inside on passing downs. And now they can do that. Now they can bring in Johnson on passing downs and move John Franklin-Myers inside. And then you've got Franklin-Myers and Quinnen Williams and Jermaine Johnson. You got quite a few pass rushers. My concern for this year, the next couple of years, is they also have Jacob Martin. And although Vinny Curry is a veteran, one thing that we've learned about Vinny Curry over his career is he is very effective in small doses. He's like that 3-point shooter that you bring off the bench. He plays 8 minutes a game, but those 8 minutes he can tear it up. Vinny Curry has that in him. So to me, between Jacob Martin, Vinny Curry, and Jermaine Johnson, you've got a lot of quote unquote pass rush specialists. So I'm worried that he'll have I don't think he's got a path to as many snaps as the guys we've already mentioned above him. But I do think long-term, he's going to outlast clearly Vinny Curry. I think he's more talented than Jacob Martin. And I think eventually they see Jermaine Johnson and Karlaftis on the outside. The last thing I want to say about that is there are some leagues he might be a traditional OLB as well, depending on how they end up categorizing his position. Long-term, I love him. I don't see him being remotely valuable this year, though.
All right, we're going to keep moving here. And Gary, this one confused me as well a bit, especially later on in the draft. To me, it kind of feels like the Jaguars doing Jaguar stuff that we've seen in the past, where it confuses people. So they traded back up into the first. I think they moved up to get Devin Lloyd. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they just gave that big contract to Aluakun that we talked about a lot here. And then in the third round, they took Chad Muma, who a lot of people liked pre-draft. He was a really high-end athlete and was productive in college. So with Devin Lloyd, he higher draft capital, but it kind of seems like they created a mess for IDP-wise. How are you feeling about this in Jacksonville with the linebackers?
Well, I did drop the ball on putting him in the chart. Apparently, what round was it they got Muma?
They moved back up into the first to get him. Or Chad Muma was in the third, I think.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's just I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I mean, it doesn't matter what the situation is as long as Devin Lloyd starts next to Foy's head, he's going to be productive, probably productive by default. I don't see anybody other than possibly this other rookie bypassing him. I mean, he's a high motor talent, great opportunity. I don't want to eat a bunch more time, so I'll let Justin do his thing.
Yep, go ahead.
Well, what I want to add here is I think the Muma pick is important here. One of the things that, or probably the thing that Muma is best at, Muma is almost like a Pete Werner. Like he's the type of guy you want to have in against the run. And think about who's in Jacksonville's division. You've got Derrick Henry and you've got Jonathan Taylor. You have to stop the run if you're going to come out of the AFC South. So getting Muma is a great idea. I would not be surprised if we don't see more 3 linebacker sets in Jacksonville this year, so they don't get continually torched by these 2 great running backs. That Aluakun to me is a lock. He's going to be there for 3 downs. He can play the run and play the pass. I see Lloyd and Muma either being there in 3 linebacker sets. That wouldn't surprise me. But I think against those guys, Muma might play more than Lloyd. So it really concerns me that I think Lloyd and Muma, if you put them together, make an NFL linebacker. And maybe but that doesn't help us for fantasy at all.
Yeah, that's the whole problem for us is trying to sort that out. How does that matter for our fantasy teams? James, boy, I tell you, there wasn't a whole lot of excitement for these defensive tackles in my mind for an IDP perspective, even in DT required leagues, and same thing with the Packers in general. Another little bit of a head scratcher for me, and I think a lot of people, but does Devonte Wyatt move your needle at all for a defensive tackle?
I feel like I can just say no and we can move on.
Amen.
That's really all it is. I guess maybe he's a little bit better than Jordan Davis. I'll give you that. I might want to invest there, but that's like saying, would I rather have 2 pennies or a penny? Doesn't really matter.
All right. Well, Justin, you're up for this next one here. And I actually liked this pick quite a bit more than some of the other ones that we just recently talked about. George Karlaftis going to the Kansas City Chiefs. It kind of feels like he's going to be one of their edge players. I know they sort of moved Chris Jones back inside a bit, and that helped out last year. How are you feeling about him on this possibly revamped Kansas City defensive front?
I like him a lot. I'm with you. He's in terms of particularly even for redraft, right? To me, he's my redraft or rookie defensive line sleeper. We talked about some of these other players who landed in terrible spots. Well, he landed in a great spot. They need somebody on the edge. I think obviously they needed Chris Jones to be out there on the edge more than they wanted to. Now Karlaftis will get the advantage of lining up next to a Chris Jones, who's obviously going to get more attention. The other thing I really like about Karlaftis is I think he does have 3 down. He already has a 3 down skill set. He still needs developing, but in terms of like showing up to the NFL, he can set an edge. He does have pass rush moves. He's obviously on a team that we can foresee being in leads, and that'll help us a lot for getting more pass rush opportunities. I like him here. I would not be surprised if Karlaftis leapfrogs a lot of the people in front of him. Still don't see him as a huge option, but don't be surprised if Karlaftis ends up being your DL3 by the end of the year when he wasn't drafted and nobody even knew his name for the first 3 weeks of the season.
We got 2 left here. Moving on back to the secondary, we got back-to-back sort of safeties. Gary, this next one does have a little bit more interest for me. That's Daxton Hill to the Cincinnati Bengals, because there was a lot of pre-draft talk and then afterwards about him potentially playing some cornerback too. And if he is on the field a lot as a cornerback on that defense, sort of a slot player, cornerback required leagues, maybe a guy to pick up off the bench, pick up off waivers, put on your bench and see what happens. But how do you like the fit of Daxton Hill there? Because I know it's a crowded safety group.
Don't they still have Hilton playing the slot too? And he's still a number.
I believe they still have Hilton.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, you got Von Miller and Bates sitting there. Those are your 2 clear-cut guys. So, I mean, when it comes to Hill, I like him as a third safety. I mean, I don't know what kind of other value to slap on a guy. It really doesn't matter. I don't see him replacing the 2 main full-time guys. So I don't have a lot of redraft interest, but possibly dynasty.
And just because our other guy, is coming up here, I was going to ask you which one of these 2, if it was one of these 2, Justin, is your DB1 overall, because you said it wasn't Hamilton.
Correct. It'll be the next guy, which I'll talk about in a minute. I want to say one quick thing about Daxton Hill. I see Daxton Hill as being Bell's heir. Bell's contract is up next year. The Bengals just clearly entered their Super Bowl window, which I don't even think they were prepared for, and they understand how important that safety set. So I think they drafted Hill knowing that we've got a 5, 6, 8 year run here, possibly at making some playoffs, and Bell's getting long in the tooth. But it's the last pick of the first round that is my dark horse for rookie DB1, and that's Lewis Cine. I think the reason he's going to get overlooked is he's playing next to Harrison Smith. Harrison Smith had a great season last year. Harrison Smith is a great safety, one of the best safeties in the league. But Harrison Smith can play up and down the field. He can play anywhere. He's got veteran presence, and he can do a lot of damage from the post. Cine is, in my opinion, a much better box defender than he is post defender. So I don't think the Vikings want him playing free safety. I think they want him up front. And this reminds me of a couple of years ago when Anthony Harris was with the Vikings, and they had Harris doing more of that sort of stuff. And we saw Harrison Smith's value drop because they needed Anthony Harris up front more often. Harris ships out to Philadelphia. What happens? Harrison Smith's value comes back. And I think when they get in there that we may see Cine being up front in the action, getting that Anthony Harris production we had a few years ago from the Vikings, and Smith's production will drop. But a lot to be seen. But when I watch Lewis Cine play, I picture him being up front more than being a post guy.
James, how do you like him out of these defensive backs from the first round?
I like him long-term as more of the heir apparent to Harrison Smith as opposed to stepping on the field in year 1 and producing. But, I don't think Justin's exactly advocating for him to be a DB1 by the end of the season.
Correct.
He's advocating for him to be the best of these rookies when all
Right.
these rookies are going to have iffy playing time here and there, and they're going to have to grow and learn the playbook, as we often see. So do I have any issue with that? No, but do I necessarily think that I need to invest here early? Also, no. I mean, the overall feel of this entire class is I feel there's a solid floor for the vast majority of these guys, but that ceiling doesn't seem very attainable anytime soon. So there's not a lot of difference in separation in this first round for me. And more than likely, I'm just going to be investing in whoever's cheapest as opposed to this guy's my guy or this guy's got a great situation. There's a few guys who are a little bit better than others, but relatively speaking, I don't want to pay whatever the price is. I know how rookie drafts operate. I see how they go. Someone falls in love with someone falls in love with that other someone, and prices just soar up. And that's fine. That's how this model works. But I'm not going to get caught in that. Give me the best first rounder with the cheapest price, and I will walk away happy. Or just let me trade my picks, as I always say, but I know I'm just beating that dead horse. But in general, I don't think that there's a lot of yes, I like what we're seeing here. We're going to see a stud in year one. There's no real optimism for that at any reasonable frequency. So just, take that step back, as I've been preaching for, I don't know, 2 years now. Just relax a little bit here. There's a lot of niceness here. There's a lot of potential, but the potential's a ways away versus nearby.
Well, we are at about time here tonight. I want to thank everyone for hanging out with us over on YouTube. Again, make sure you're subscribed at gridironratings.com, but also subscribed on YouTube for when the shows on offense go live. Gary, do you know when that is offhand during the week? I don't have it memorized yet.
I think they're doing that on Saturdays around noonish Eastern.
All right. And then, of course, Thursdays, is that still at 8?
Yeah. We got the Chop
Eastern?
Shop. Man, we got the Chop Shop. We got, Rider Dynasty's been flown now for over here with us for a couple of weeks. So they got a complete playlist. Look, folks, please go check out Gridiron Ratings on YouTube. Like, subscribe, help us out. We right now we're giving away an Aaron Donald jersey or something. The only thing you got to do is go watch the video of the fantasy review and comment or something. Go check it out. It's really cool.
And of course, you guys know where to find me, Gary, and James. You can see their Twitter handles down there, all their content over on gridironratings.com and Twitter. But Justin, I want to thank you for joining us once again. It was great to have you back on. And please let everyone know where they can find you and all of your content.
Yeah, check me out on Twitter at downwithidp. That's where most of my stuff will be coming in and out. So check me out there. Then obviously when I can tune back into Gridiron Ratings, getting defensive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're going to try to drag him. Yeah, drag him back in a few times. Shoot, maybe next week if I can get him in here.
There you go.
Well, thanks again for tuning in, everyone. I want to thank you for always being here with us. It'll be rookies for the next few weeks, both on Tuesday and Thursday. So hopefully you're in the mood for more rookie talk. But again, thank you and have a good night, everybody.